Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So we are going to get to talk to somebody today that actually moved the needle on pop culture. Somebody that changed everything. And we're talking about super producer Butch Vig, guy who produced Garbage and Firetown and Spooner and Killdozer and the Smashing Pumpkins and Green Day and Foo Fighters and so many more. But the way in which he moved the needle on pop culture was he was responsible, in part, for a record that changed everything. Every single time I get ready to play this song on any of the rock stations that I'm on, I go, if it wasn't for this song and the album it was on, this radio station probably wouldn't exist. And if it did, we'd be playing a very different type of music. I'm talking about Nirvana's Nevermind album that Butch Vig produced. He is part of a new documentary about the studio where he got his start, the Smart Studios story. And we are incredibly lucky to talk to him today about this and that and everything else that he's done. Can you hear me? We're doing this across a couple different ISDN lines. You got me?
I've got you loud and clear, yep.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much for making the time today to be part of this little show. I really can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how much it means to us. You've made records that have changed the shape of our lives, and it's a big, big deal that you're here talking to us, specifically about the Smart Studios story.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, we're glad that you guys want to talk about the documentary. It's finally getting released in Record Store Day in November, and we're talking to a couple different digital distributors about releasing it in February or March. So it's finally getting out in the world, which is great.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Butch has been working on a documentary flick called The Smart Studios Story. It's the official film of Record Store Day, and it's basically about how you came to be what you are through the studio that you set up in this very DIY way back in the day.
Exactly, and it was really director Wendy Schneider's idea, and it's really her baby, too. I mean, she has worked a ton on the documentary, and done it very DIY style, much like the studio, as you mentioned. She raised a lot of the funds on a Kickstarter campaign, and it's almost like guerrilla filmmaking in some ways. But I think it's great because that's just totally in the spirit of Smart Studios.
Well, I mean, didn't you start Smart Studios? Correct me if I'm wrong on the mythology here, but you had one of your earliest bands. Was it Spooner? Like that you wanted to make a record. Your mom sent a letter or called like a local music critic, asking for help, and he was like, "Yeah, never gonna happen." And you went, "F it, we're just gonna do it ourselves." And that's kind of how the studio came into existence.
That is a true story. I mean, there were a couple of years that passed before I actually was able to open the studio, but I had a band called Eclipse in high school, and we were not particularly good, but we did have an original song. We wanted to record a 7-inch single and release it, and the local music critic in La Crosse was the only person we knew to reach out to, completely shut us down. He just said they need a manager, they need a producer, they need a label, they need a publisher, and we didn't have any of those, of course.
Because you're in high school.
Yeah, so we were in high school. So and it was right before I went off to the University of Wisconsin, and so when I went to the university, I one of the things I studied there was music and film, and I did a lot of recording at the Electronic Music Studio, which was very inspiring to me. And that's where I met Duke Erickson and eventually met Steve Marker, who I started the studio with, and I just fell into the music scene, and it was all very DIY. We just figured out how to make records on our own. And I wanted to be an engineer and producer. I didn't even really know that at the time, but that's just what I pursued. Right.
And I mean, like Smart Studios, correct me if I'm wrong, but you recorded Nirvana there and Smashing Pumpkins and Garbage and Death Cab for Cutie and a whole bunch more, right?
Yeah, we had a 30-year run there, and it's the list of bands is pretty incredible. I mean, a lot of course, underground local bands from the Madison area, from the Midwest, but there's some well-known names in there too.
Well, you know what's interesting is I somehow, when I was like in grade school, I kind of formed, without even thinking about it, a little bit of a punk rock sensibility with music. Because this kid on my school bus, was like, oh man, you want to listen to some real deal stuff? Here, take these. And he gave me a couple of tapes, which had just mixes of stuff that he'd put on them. Like, who knows how many generations they've been degraded. But there was Black Flag and Bad Brains and Killdozer on there. And
three incredible bands, right? And all completely unique in their own way.
Butch Vig and I talk more about the mixtape that changed everything next.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
And now we return to super producer Butch Vig and me talking about a mixtape featuring some of his work that changed my life in high school. I'll never forget, in high school, somebody hands me a Nirvana album, and I listened to it. I was like, this is like what's on that tape. This is like, this is like Black Flag and Bad Brains and Killdozer, and that it's different, but this could be big. And that was all I ever sort of like figured. And come to find out, years later, you've got a hand in like pretty much all of this. It's incredible, really, when you think about it.
Well, when you see the Smart Studios documentary, you can see sort of the steps that allowed me to be able to work with a band like Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins, and how, in a way, timing was great for me, but also just for that era, because coming out of the 80s into the early 90s, I think the scene was ripe for a change. And like music constantly evolves, and things become passé. When they become passé, some new style of music or new band or artist will come in and leap to the forefront. And that's really what happened with Nirvana, especially because people wanted to change, and I was lucky to be part of that. But if you look at the steps leading up to that, it like I said, it just totally made sense. Kind of cutting my teeth in the local punk rock scene, and also being a pop geek. I always loved pop music and hooks and melodies, and I was somehow able to bring that out in in bands like Nirvana.
And it's just like, I don't want to do, I mean, it's interesting because you're privileged enough to talk to someone like Butch Vig, and you don't want to harp on the past because, there's so much that you continue to do. But seeing as this movie is kind of about your roots, I will bring up the fact that I'm on like 5 different radio stations, and every day on every single one of them, I'll play Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. And what I think to myself in that situation is, if it wasn't for this song, the radio station I'm on probably wouldn't exist. And if it did, we'd be playing a very different kind of music. It's an incredible moment that you contributed to.
Yeah, and it changed my life. Nirvana's success really helped the studio. In some ways, that's also part of the documentary. All of a sudden, we had tons of projects being thrown our way, and I got tons and tons of offers. And it also allowed me the opportunity to start Garbage. Just on the nature of the success of working with Nirvana and the Pumpkins, and if it hadn't happened, I'm sure I'd still be making music, but maybe on a different level in some ways. And I know everybody involved with Nirvana, Dave Grohl and Chris, and even the management and people from the record company. The record profoundly changed their lives. It's like rare when you get a chance to work on something like that actually becomes critically and commercially just massive.
Well, I mean, it profoundly changed all of our lives. Speaking of life-changing moments, there's a story, and I want to know if this is true. Did you have, like, back in the day, you had a band, and you were in sort of like the Midwest, and you were making some noise, and you got an opportunity to showcase for Clive Davis?
That's true, yeah. And it's kind of
you go and tell it. But there's a story of like it was one of those fateful near misses that I think it just, when I think about it, when I hear the story, and I want you to tell it, but it affected everything, like all of our lives. This near miss you had with Clive Davis, record label impresario like none other, really sort of like was part of what changed the landscape. So if this is true, go ahead and tell it.
It is true. The band Duke and I were in Spooner. We had put out a couple EPs and singles and writing our own music, and we were getting some attention. And we got a call from Arista Records, and Clive Davis wanted to see us, so we scheduled quite quickly a gig in Chicago. We really didn't even get a chance to publicize, but we got there, and it was one of those disaster gigs. There was only a handful of people in the room. The guy across the street had a warrant out because he was broadcasting through his CB radio through the PA, which was louder than the music. Our manager picked up Clive at the airport at O'Hare, and was so nervous he forgot to take his parking brake off. His car started on fire on the way to the gig. This is
That's the part
true.
where I was like, this can't be true. That actually happened. He was driving Clive Davis from the airport to see you, and his car set on fire because he's too nervous to turn the handbrake off.
They had to get out of the car and leave it, have it towed off, and they took a cab. A cab picked him up and took him to the gig. And so we played like a 30-minute set with Clive Davis and a few friends in the room, sitting at a table right in front of us. We were super nervous. Clive came up and said, "I really hear something there. I think, I'd like to do a single or an EP deal and just see how things go. I want to put you in the studio with this guy named Robert." And we said, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool, man." We were very excited. And then we talked to our attorney the next day, and our attorney said, "Oh, you know what? Some other labels are interested. Elektra's interested. Capitol's interested. I don't think this is that good of a deal. I think you can get a better deal." So we said no. And then the deals with Capitol and Elektra and all the other labels eventually all fell through, and we released the record on our indie label instead, or the first Spooner album. But it turns out the producer, Robert, was Robert Mutt Lang. That's who they wanted us to go in the studio with.
And in case somebody doesn't know, Mutt Lang, super producer to the stars, sold billions of records with everyone from AC/DC to Def Leppard to Shania Twain and anyone else in between that you care to mention. Like, so what do you think? Do you think you would have had if you had that experience of working with old Mutt Lang? Do you think the records you would have produced would have sounded different if you were learning your tricks from him?
Well, I wish I would have got a chance to work with him, but I have a feeling where we were at in Spooner at the time that maybe working with him would have completely destroyed us. I don't know that we were of caliber to make the kind of records with the bands he was working with. Now, there's no way to know that. It may have been a terrible experience, but I have a feeling I would have absorbed everything that he did because that's what I was doing back in the day. Anytime I would work with another engineer, go to another studio, I was always asking questions and trying to figure out how they got certain sounds or why they're doing this in the arrangement. And it's hard to know, but in some ways, I guess it's probably a good thing that we didn't because I sort of had to figure out things out on my own and eventually did.
More with Butch Vig next.
I'm only happy when it rains.
Stimulated minds want to know, what were you thinking? No, really, give us a call and tell us. KPRC AM 950.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
And now more with super producer to the stars, Butch Vig. With a guy like Mutt Lang, I got to say, you can hear his records. There's a certain backing vocal trick that he uses where you go, you hear it on the Cars record and the Def Leppard record, and you hear it on a Bryan Adams record, and you go, oh, that's that Mutt Lang guy. That's that thing that he does. You're kind of different in that if I go back and listen to your music, whether it's Nirvana or Foo Fighters or, Garbage, which is obviously your band, so that's going to be a different take, or Against Me or Smashing Pumpkins, or it seems like you don't necessarily have a stamp, like a signature stamp that you put on everyone. You kind of, when you say you're a producer, there's 18 million different versions of that. But what is your role for people that kind of look at the back of records that they love and go, what exactly does this guy do? Because everybody has a different take.
Well, I don't really think that I do have a sonic imprint. So, I take what you're saying there as a compliment in some ways. I really try to adhere to what the aesthetic of the band is. For me, early on, producing was, a lot of it was engineering, just trying to make things sound good, and then helping the band play good, get good performances. as I worked more and more with bands, I got more into arrangements and the songwriting, and trying to really help craft the songs so they were really focused. But ultimately, the producer, at least for me, is from my point of view, is psychological. It's like 50% is trying to get inside the artist's head and understand what their vision is, and it's my job to help them find that vision. It's not my record. In Garbage, of course, it's my record because it's the band I'm in. But when I'm working with the Foo Fighters or Against Me or Green Day or whoever it is, it's their songs and their vision, and it's really important for me to help understand where it is they're trying to go. And a lot of that is psychological, like I said.
Have you ever had a moment with a particular artist where like it was tough getting into their mindset or trying to understand them, where they're a little bit shut off or closed down, and you eventually break through and boy, that was worth it? Like, was there anyone that was kind of tough to get into their head a little bit?
Well, it happens, more often than not, and usually sometimes it's over a particular song. Whether where the direction the song is going, I don't think it's getting there 100% for some reason, or it's maybe a wrong vibe, or it's not feeling authentic to me from when the artist is performing it, and that sometimes that's hard to detect. It's more of a gut feeling. You just, something doesn't feel right, and then you have to sort of figure out what it is. Is it the arrangement? Is it the performance? Is it the wrong key? Is there something lyrically? And then once I figure that out, I have to talk to the artist, whoever it is, whether it was Kurt Cobain or Billy Corgan or Laura Jane Grace from Against Me or Billy Joe from Green Day. I have to figure out what that is and then try to, sort of tactfully get into their heads to see if I can get them to also figure that out, and then figure out how we could make it better. And that's not, there's no easy way to sort of do that. You just got to kind of be in the process and work it out.
And you know what? You may know the answer to this. You may not, because I have to imagine it's an intensely personal thing. But before Laura Jane Grace became Laura Jane Grace, there was a song that Against Me dropped called Stop. The lyric was Stop, take some time to think about what's important to you. You've got to make a serious decision. Do you think that had anything to do, and this is me just being a nerdy fan of Against Me, but do you think that had anything to do with the decision that made Laura Jane Grace Laura Jane Grace?
Looking back, there's a lot of Against Me songs you could probably read into where Tom was before Tom became Laura Jane. But in fact, the last song on New Wave, The Ocean, I think, I remember asking Laura Jane, Tom at the time, what is that song about? And there's a line in there, if I was a girl, my mother would have named me Laura. And I remember asking...
you go.
Tom at the time, what is that song about? And he said, oh man, I was just really stoned one day and I wrote these lyrics. But looking back, obviously that was something that was coming out of Laura Jane Grace at the time, and she didn't want to really share all that, and I didn't find out about it till later. But I'm still really close to the band. I love Against Me. They're one of the most incredible bands in the world, and I'm sitting here in my home studio, and there's a big picture of Laura Jane Grace on the wall here. One of the pictures on the wall in front of me, and they have a new record out that's great. But they're just an incredible band.
Yeah, no, they've and it's funny because like I've always thought of Against Me as a band that's willing to go out and fight for their music, and I was just like, wow, Laura Jane has been fighting her entire life for pretty much everything that she's ever done. That's from the outside looking in, that's my kind of take on that band, and I think that a willingness and ability to go out and fight for the things that are important for you in life just comes out in their music at all times. And I absolutely understand why you say that.
And very few bands really do that. They don't want to risk that. But Laura Jane is fearless, and her lyrics have always been very social political, sometimes personal, and sometimes just looking at the outside world from her perspective. But we need bands like that, who question what's going on, question authority, and question sometimes, what's going on inside your own head.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't remember who it was, but it's something I've clutched to my heart ever since. I think it was Rollins said something like, what punk rock is to me is questioning everything, And going back to you getting Smart Studios together, that that to me is, hey, we're not going to be offered an easy shot by someone. We're going to make our own road. They say we need an agent, a manager, a publishing deal, all of this to go make a record. Well, F that. We're just going to go do it. It seems like, not necessarily by design, but you have this natural sort of like punk rock ability to just go do stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you watch the film, it's about 90 minutes long. The music starts out pretty raw and scrappy. And over the course of 90 minutes, there's an evolution in terms of what happened at the studio. We got better gear. Both Steve and I became better engineers and producers. The bands we were recording became better musicians, and the level of musicianship and songwriting craft probably got better. And so it's an evolution. But when we started out, I had a lot of people telling me, "Oh, you can't start a recording studio," or they kept saying, "You have to charge $100 an hour." I said, "There's no way you can charge $100 an hour. Look at the studio we're in. It's got egg cartons on the walls, and we only have 8 tracks, and we've only got about 10 microphones that don't sound very good." And we didn't really ever let that get in our way. It just was just something that we wanted to do, and we were lucky because even though I didn't know what I was doing, the bands didn't really know either. So, those early records I made with Tar Babies and Killdozer and Die Kreutzen, whatever, they were me trying to figure it out, but the bands also trying to figure it out, and they had no experiences at the Hit Factory in New York City or Ocean Way in Los Angeles working with top-notch producers. They didn't know what making a record was, so they would let me sort of run the ship, and it was a learning experience for everyone involved, really.
Yeah, and it's almost like, look, you grow, you evolve, you get better, you get more than 8 tracks eventually to go make records with. But I think, sometimes for some records, specifically some of the ones you're talking about, the beauty is almost in the limitation, like the fact that you only have 8 tracks to work with, and the fact that the guitar player only knows these chords or what have you contributes to the overall sound that you wind up loving. It's like that you work with the tools that you're given, and you create something unique because of it.
Yeah, we had to make records really fast back then. It was just the nature of no budgets, basically, and I had to learn to do things like on the fly and make decisions really quickly. Like with drums, we always mixed to stereos. That was it. So there'd be a submix. I'd have to balance everything and EQ it, and if I was going to add compression or whatever, and then you'd be done. You'd record it, and that was it. You couldn't go back and, let's turn the kick drum up, or I want to add some more reverb to the tom fills or whatever. It was too late. It was already recorded. And you just had to live with it, and the same with everything else we would do in the records. So many records back then, we would track everything in a day. Maybe the second day come back and do vocals and finish some lead guitars and some, if there are any extra overdubs, keyboards or whatever, backing vocals. And then the last day we'd mix like 10 or 12 or 15 songs. And so I made all these records in like 2 or 3 days, and I did that for several years, and that was really a good learning ground because you had to sort of trust your instincts because you had to be so fast in making decisions, and I think that's been really helpful through my career.
Yeah, a record producer buddy of mine once told me, he was like, every time you go in and you're doing these things, he was like, essentially you're making choices, and you hope that they're good choices, but like part of who you are as a producer is a person that makes choices constantly about the record that you're making.
That's a really good point because everyone seems to think, when people ask me what producing is like, they think there's a eureka moment where you're staying in a room and you listen to a song arrange and go, I know the chorus needs a string section, ta-da, and that's it's going to make or break the song.
Right.
It's not that. It's like 100. It's 100 or 1,000 small decisions you make every day. Like, is that the right mic on the snare? Is that the right fill? Maybe we should turn the ambience up here. Maybe the bass player should play a high octave coming out of the bridge to set up the low note in the chorus. The phrasing's not right in the singing. There's just tons of things, and it's sort of a give and take with the artist. You discuss things with them and suggest things, and you go, you missed a note there. Let's go fix that or whatever. And there's just tons and tons of things like that are through the whole process of recording, and those are what add up to production. Like I said, it's not. Sometimes there are eureka moments, like one big thing that you will discover making a record or a particular song that will sort of help it go to where it needs to go. But more often than not, it's just those little things, the constant addition of all those little decisions that ultimately make the sound of a record.
And you know what? You're a drummer, so I've kind of got a personal drummer question for you. I grew up playing drums, and that was one of the first things I noticed about like this tape that my buddy gave me with Black Flag and Bad Brains and Killdozer on it. And then I noticed it about Nirvana. Like at the time, had you made a record with Mutt Lange, the guy that produced Def Leppard, the drums would have sounded like a cannon that had been recorded in an airline hangar or something like that. Just like these drums were huge sounding. Everything was very huge sounding at the time, but in a completely artificial way. And when I listened to these bands, I was like, these drums sound like me recording my own stuff at home with a couple microphones. It sounds like these drums are real and in the room. And there'd been sort of, with Black Flag records and with, Bad Brains records, there's very sort of, I guess, lo-fi quality to it. But when I heard Nirvana, I was like, those drums, they sound real. Like they're in the room with you, but it doesn't sound, like it doesn't sound cheap and cheerful the way a lot of the records I was really into at the time was. Was there a conscious decision, like, here's everything that's going on with drums right now, we're going to do the exact opposite?
Well, a lot of the bands I work with wanted to sort of capture a natural realism to what they were doing. They, especially the scrappier, sort of punkier sounding bands, they did not want to sound like Steely Dan or Def Leppard. But it's funny because I was listening to those Def Leppard records and in awe of how great they sounded. And in some ways, like if you listen, there's very few perfect songs in this world. I think Photograph is one of them. It's just like, but definitely one, yeah. And we had that. Steve and I made a reel-to-reel tape at Smart that we had as a mixing reference. And there were maybe 20 songs on there that we really liked the sound of all different styles. And one of them was Photograph by Def Leppard, because if I was mixing a band and I'd start to lose my perspective, I need to get it, like, where should the vocals be mixed? What should the guitars and bass and drums relationship be? And so we'd put that reel on and quickly zip around and listen to things, and they would just give you a reference. Oh, the guitars are too loud. I can't hear enough of the kick drum, or whatever it was. So I was in awe of those records, but I had to understand that those bands I was recording did not want to sound like Def Leppard. So it was my job to try and make them sound like who they were.
Right. Wow. Have you ever had a chance to tell? Mutt Lange that story? I refer back to Photograph every now and then.
I would love to, man. I think he's an absolute genius because he's really a song craftsman as much as a producer and engineer. He really. He's just had an amazing career, and some of his, like, even going as far back as AC/DC, the records just sound incredible, and I appreciate his sort of obsession with perfectionism. I have a little part of that in me, and I appreciate his aesthetic when it comes to that.
We talk more with Butch Vig next about bands he would love to work with.
Real Radio.
104.1.
Now, more AD on the radio.
More Now with Butch Vig, known for producing Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day, and so many more. We're talking to him about the Smart Studios story, a documentary that tells of his early days along with the studio he started in rural Wisconsin. I mean, you've worked with A to Z of what matters in rock music and beyond since you started out back in the day. But is there an artist that you are dying to work with that you haven't gotten a chance to yet?
Oh, I get asked that question every now and then. It's something I don't really think about. I just kind of, I work on whatever projects I'm on, and I'm constantly working on music at home. And, we had a Garbage record out earlier this year, The Strange Little Birds, which has been really well received, and I've been working on some music for TV and film, and I've got a couple side projects going, and and I'm helping Wendy, with the Smart documentary. So I don't even think of those terms of like, man, I have a wish list. There was one session I was really hoping was going to happen was when Dave Grohl and I made Sound City, the documentary. One of the possible collaborations was going to be Neil Young with Dave Grohl on drums and Chris Novoselic on bass.
Right.
And we thought it was going to happen, and so we were set up at the Foo Fighters Studio 606 out in the Valley, and we were ready to go, and then a couple of days where we thought Neil was going to show up and jam with them, it just didn't happen. And Neil was interviewed, but I think Dave had to fly in somewhere because I think he was actually out on a book tour. But long story short, I know that if Neil played with Dave and Chris, he'd be like, "This sounds pretty good. Let's go on tour." it would be a new version of Crazy Horse because it just would have been unbelievable. And I for some reason, I just knew in the back of my head, if Neil played with those two, he'd go, "This sounds cool. Let's go out and play some shows together." And they'd end up going on playing some gigs. But sadly, it didn't happen.
Well, there's still time. If you had to pick one moment, maybe it was someone's record, maybe it was going to a show, maybe it was seeing a performance on TV. If you had to pick one moment where music really, really reached you and made you go, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with my life, but it's got to be something that includes this. Would you have an answer as to what that would be? Well,
there's sort of a couple epiphany moments like that. When I was really young, I saw The Who on the Smothers Brothers. My parents would watch that show. My mom was a music teacher and a huge music fan, and she bought all the records that I was exposed to, like the Beatles and whatever. She loved pop music and what was, on top 40 radio. But I remember I was playing piano, and then I saw Keith Moon play, and I was like, I want to do that, even though I don't play drums anywhere near like Keith Moon. I play more like Ringo or Charlie Watts, pretty simple 4/4 beats. But that was an epiphany moment. But then when I started playing in bands in Madison, Wisconsin, and right around the time we started the studio, there was that whole punk rock movement. And when I heard the first Ramones album, I felt like I can do this. The bands I'm in, this is like of our generation. Up till that point, like seeing The Who or Led Zeppelin, they were like rock stars, and they were sort of unattainable, unapproachable.
Yeah.
They were in a total different planet. And then the whole punk rock new wave explosion made me feel like I'm part of that. I can be part of that. And that's what really inspired me to want to keep pursuing writing songs and being in bands and really sort of dive into producing and engineering full time.
I think a lot of people look at punk rock and go, hey, this was music for the people, by the people, and as an audience member, they recognize that. But I think what a lot of people miss is that for musicians or people that want to go make records or be involved in that, it meant sort of an easier path to it than had, like a Led Zeppelin or a Who or this enormous stadium rock thing that seems so unattainable. I think punk rock was the great social equalizer, not just for their audiences, but for people that wanted to go make records.
Yeah, and it's, every now and then they see a band comes by that inspires 1,000 bands, and the Ramones were definitely one of them. I mean, they inspired all the English punk rock movement, the Sex Pistols and the Clash and Howard Devoto and Joy Division. All those bands saw the Ramones' first tour, and they were like, wow, we're going to do that. And the same goes for a band like like the Pixies or REM. REM inspired 1,000 bands who just loved their songwriting style and their sort of indie aesthetic. And every now and then a band comes around like that. Nirvana was one of them. A lot of people heard Nirvana, and then look what happened to alternative radio in the early 90s. Was just completely dominated for several years by Nirvana. Some were Nirvana sound-alikes, but it was that for a time that was sort of what was popular, and every now and then bands come by and do that. But I think that's a good thing when young musicians or young artists hear a band or see a band that inspires them. That's a good thing because they're going to take those bands' influences and hopefully turn that into something new and hopefully unique in some way.
Well, I think also you're hitting on something. The Smart Studios story, when people get a chance to watch that, when kids get a chance to watch that and find it, because what's interesting about Nirvana, what's interesting about all these records that you were involved in that happened 25 years ago, what's strange is look, like I said, I'm on like 5 radio stations, all of which play these songs every single day. And when I was growing up in the 90s, stuff that came out in the 70s, that was cool, but it was your parents' music. Now, like a Nirvana record means just as much to a 16-year-old kid as it did to their parents back in the day. So it's a weird thing in that it has endured and stayed fresh for so long. So I think there's going to be 16-year-old kids watching the Smart Studios story that go, hey, I want to do that, or I want to be that. And this looks like you don't need $1 million. You don't need a massive blown out recording studio to just go make stuff and do things. What would you say is the best way for somebody that watches this and gets inspired to start out? Like if a 16-year-old kid goes, Butch Vig, I want to be you. What do I do? Where do they start?
Well, the first thing is you have to be ready to just ignore obstacles, and to a certain point, you have to kind of be stupid about it and just plow through it. Because if you start thinking of all obstacles in your way, that's going to just hinder you, and quite frankly, it might turn into a point that you can't overcome. And I think a little blind stupidity, blind faith in where you're going is helpful.
Real 101 Radio 104.1.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The Dumbing Up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
And now the thrilling conclusion of our chat with super producer Butch Vig of Garbage, Spooner, Killdozer, Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day, Foo Fighters, and more fame. In today's day and age where you can sit home all weekend long and be entertained on your phone. You can watch movies, you can play games against people, you can read, you can do all these things, and you never have to leave the couch. But you're right, that experience of going to see a band live, there's nothing that has, you can't digitally replicate that. But it also means that guys and girls in bands they really have to be good now. You really have to give someone a reason to get off the couch and spend money and go see you in a day and age where people are staying home. So paradoxically, as digital has, a lot of people are like, oh, digital's ruined music. I was like, I think it's led to the best live shows that there's ever been. Like the standard of going out and killing it live now is incredibly high.
Well, the technology has sort of leveled the playing field, because it used to be a lot more daunting to try and put a great live show together. It was almost impossible 20 years for bands how to figure out to promote themselves. And now an artist a young band can record a song in their laptop in their bedroom, and if it's good, they can put it up on the internet. It can go viral in 24 hours. 1 million people can hear it, and a week or two later, they can be playing in a theater, opening for someone or doing their own show somewhere, and playing to 1,000 people or more. Mm. That really didn't happen 20 years ago. So,
no.
That's one of the great things. One of the bad things about digital, obviously, it's because music is free now. Nobody wants to pay for it. But like I said, it sort of leveled the playing field and made it possible for anyone, if they have any talent at all, to really get their music heard and to get out there and to very quickly find an audience.
One thing I got to we've taken up a lot of your time, but on a personal nerdy musical level, I have to thank you, because I was in a band for a little bit back in the day, and we made a couple records, and one of them we have Andy Wallace in common. He mixed one of our records.
Oh, right on. Andy's awesome.
He's amazing. It was unbelievable experience, and just the nicest human on the planet. Like, it's incredibly intimidating and daunting going in, because like when I was a kid, I produced the record and I was like, okay, Andy Wallace, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and agree with everything that you say. But there was one point where I was like, can we put this a little higher? He's like, oh yeah, sure, of course. I was like, I just asked Andy Wallace to do something. He did it. Anyways, it was crazy and mind blowing. But the other thing that we had in common was, I was like this kid working on with an S1000 sampler and I think a very early version of Cubase on an Atari, where I was trying to like mix real drums and sampled stuff, and then the Garbage records came along. I was like, that's the right way to do it. That's how, like, you're incredibly innovative, because that was a thing. Yeah, like a lot of people don't recognize, but the mixture of sort of like a sampled, looped, programmed element, whatever you want to call it, and live drums was something that I don't know if anyone did properly until you came along and did it.
Well, I had a S1000 sampler also, and a Kurzweil K2500. I had two, and they both had kind of different sounds and were good for different things. But yeah, you know, I got into sampling with Garbage because by the time I had that opportunity to form a band like Garbage, I had done 1,000 punk rock bands, and I was getting tired of recording bass, drums, and guitars, and I heard records like Public Enemy, and I just thought, how are they doing that? You know, and started reading about using samplers, and to me, it was sort of groundbreaking at the time, because it really freed you up to sort of try almost anything in the studio, and Garbage, the first record especially, was really just a great lab rat experience, you know, for a lab rat experiment for us. We had no intention of touring or being a long-term project, and it was just really using the studio, like, let's see if we can screw this up and mess around with this, and what can we do to change this or make the beat sound interesting or process the vocals or the guitars, and then it became kind of a direction that we've used on a lot of Garbage records, just sort of blending all those different styles together. And we still, you know, obviously we use Pro Tools now. We don't use samplers like we used to. I should get out the S1000 and the K2500, start using them again, just loading things in, because they have a sound, you know, and especially that first Garbage record, I can hear the sound of those samplers on that album.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it's it's so cool to hear that I was hacking away on the same machine that you were using, and like I remember hearing that Garbage record, and from a music nerd standpoint, being like, how is he doing this? And I think I read that you were using an S1000. I was like, I'm on the right track, although I wasn't really. But nevertheless, it was like really cool, groundbreaking, innovative thing that a lot of people were kind of attempting to do. But I was like, finally, this guy gets it right. And I think it was because you're a drummer, so you could appreciate where it should, you know, where everything should sit and work, and still, because you had this sampled, looped element like a Public Enemy record, but it also meshed very well with these real instruments. And I was just like, that's some next level stuff.
Yeah, you know, and the great thing about working with Garbage is we sort of took this lo-fi / high-tech approach. Like, I never perceived us as getting too fussy with, like, well, we've got to use a Neumann microphone or whatever. We just were interested in getting sound. So there's always been kind of a trashy sound to our records, or at least not all the songs. There's some that are quite pristine sounding, but, you know, we would run through things into the sampler, and then we'd run through stomp box pedals and chain a bunch of compressors or filtered EQs up and run them, you know, print those to another reel and tape. Now we do it within Pro Tools, but some of that we still use. When we made the last Garbage record, Strange Little Birds, there was a lot of that sort of processing where we'd take things and run them through chains, analog or digital chains, trying to make them sound more interesting to us in a way. And that's still very experimental, and that's one of the things I think that has kept Garbage together for 20 years, that all of us find that sort of creative palette in the band is being pretty wide open. You know, we have a sound when we write and record, and it's hard to define that. I think it's part of that is how we play our instruments, and just also the sensibility of what we like as a band. But part of that is the creative process that we sort of adhere to in terms of recording, and I still like mucking about. I'm sitting here in my home studio, and there's just all these stomp box pedals, and there's a couple analog synths on the floor here I've been messing around with, and you know, I still like going into those studio lab rat experiments.
Well, I think Einstein once said, like, the vast majority of his big discoveries or his best work was just the result of tinkering around. You know, like that some of the greatest things ever happen with people that have some, you know, curiosity and some time on their hands to mess around with things. So it's so cool to know that you've done that. We're going to finish with one thing that you've been part of records that have galvanized not only America, but you've been part of records that have galvanized the world, records that have, I guess, sort of appeal to everyone all over the globe. And so I think there's very few people that have actually been a part of something so massive, which puts you in a great position to answer kind of a tough question. Is with America being what it is right now, as divided as I ever remember it being in my adult lifetime, what do you think the role of music and musicians is going forward with, this upcoming election and, like all the above? Where do you see music and its role in 2016 and beyond?
Well, music has become the soundtrack of everyone's lives. It is omnipresent everywhere. With the advent of smartphones, people want to listen to music 24 hours a day, and if you watch TV shows or listen to the radio or films, music is like everywhere. And what people get out of music is it's an emotional experience that can be any number of things. There can be sort of a purely escapist viewpoint where you just don't want to think about the crappy relationship you're in or your job sucks or whatever it is, and you want to put music on that just takes you to another world. And great music has always done that, and it could be any style of music. It could be club music, it could be hip-hop or R&B, it could be country music, folk music, whatever it is. It's as a listener, there's so much great music out there, and whatever it is that turns you on, people. That's one of the great things that music has always done for people. It's like help them escape the reality of their day-to-day life. But I also think that a lot of music can mean things in a social, sometimes political way that reflects what's going on in the world around us, and that sometimes that can be a very personal moment in a song. And it can be more of an overtly social, political music, even looking back what like the Beatles did and bands like that, the Stones in the 60s, where they would write sometimes not directly, but they would write with references towards what was going on in the culture around them. And, talking about a band like Against Me, I really love bands like that write songs that make you think. And I think we need more bands to do that, because there's plenty of bands to go listen to EDM club music and just, blow your brains out on a Friday and Saturday night and not even think about anything, just get your booty shaken. But I still like it when a lyric or a song makes you think and connects with you in an emotional way, and I think there need to be more bands like that. So moving forward, I hope that there's a whole new generation of artists that maybe will be inspired by what's going on or pissed off about what's going on in the current political culture in this country, and write a song that will maybe help do something about that.
Well, no matter what it is you grew up listening to, I guarantee there's something for everybody in the Smart Studios. Sorry, the official film of Record Store Day about Butch Vig, about the legendary recording studio founded by him and Steve Marker, where they recorded Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Garbage, Death Cab for Cutie, and so many more. And I don't know about a band that's going to come along and make us think. I'm sure there will be one of them, but you've made a movie that will make everyone think, and a movie that has something in it for everyone. And we thank you not only for having done that, but for every single record that you have made that has meant so much to so many people over the years. It's an unbelievable privilege to talk to you, Butch. Thank you so much for,
and thank you
literally everything.
Yeah, this is a really fun interview. I really appreciate it, man. It's cool.
Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Gotta make a serious decision. Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Stop, take some time to think, figure out what's important to you. Gotta make a serious decision. It could be me up there in stage lights. It could be me on the TV in your living room. It could be me jet setting with my band on some time to think.